Ken, good morning or good afternoon. Um, Utility companies operate under the concept that they may charge for their product, water, wastewater, or garbage. They're the ones we're concerned with. We're concerned with water right now. They may charge sufficient to cover all reasonable cost. And in California, because water rates, wastewater rates, and garbage rates provided by local governments are taxes, they're very limited on as to what they can include in their rate charges. So here I have I've written out some simple equations. We're looking at this equation down here. See, this equation is for an investor-owned utility where they earn a return on rate base. And rate base in this concept is simply the total investment less accumulated depreciation plus some small amount times an allowed return on the weighted average of equity and debt capital. We won't get into that for now because it's not relevant. We'll go in here where this is for a public utility like the SFPUC or East Bay Mud. So they're allowed to earn revenues equal to operating and maintenance expense. I don't think they use tax equivalents in San Francisco. The debt service and the capital expenditures not financed by debt. It's a simple equation. So their model has to basically replicate this. And once they work out what revenues requirement, they have to establish rates. So that's where we're at. So before we go any further, you understand the concept of price elasticity. If the price of water goes up by 1% and people cut back their use of actual water units by more than 1%, then total revenues will decrease. That's called an elastic demand. If, on the other hand, they increase their rates by 1%, and total water units increase by less than 1%, total revenues will be greater after the price increase than before. And that's the outcome they hope for. That's this revenue requirements here. So keep that in mind. I might have that somewhere here. I might have a little graph to show you that. There's a little table that you can work from, but that's not really necessary today. So now we'll open their model. I should have it opened, actually. Here it is. So what I'm just looking at now is the single-family residential. Just look at that. So we can see that the first unit for 2013 is nothing more than an input unit. They have an input. Then they escalate. And I'll just close that down. They escalate. Here's the equation they use to go from this amount to this amount. And then they keep doing it all the way through. They just repeat this the whole time. But we're more concerned with just these first two units here. Single-family residential and multifamily residential, because that's what the Constitution says. They can only charge for supplying these units what covers reasonable and allowable costs for current output. And they cannot use tier pricing, that's that where you step up, ascending tier pricing, which they do, to subsidize one set of customers at the expense of another. Okay, having said that, we'll talk about this, but so you can see all the way up, this is their escalation. Now, that's how they figure out their revenues. But this is just one side of the equation that I'm looking at. How they produce cost is more complex, but we can figure that out. But how did they get to these things? What assumptions did they make doing this? I know, for example, that when I read their, I don't want to play with this thing. I've gone over and over. But when they have their input assumptions, they assume elasticity of demand remains at 0.25 through 2013 to 2023. Well, that's ridiculous. That's the misuse of the concept of elasticity, and we'll talk about that. But this is just to give you an idea. I want to see what's behind all of these windows here, and I want to go through their spreadsheet. It's pretty big, but and that's not the one. But the capital charges. I don't know how they come up with them. For example, what a normal utility does, let's say they're producing $1 billion product facility. They're putting one in place. So they may take a 3 or 5 year period where they don't put anything in the rate base. In other words, they don't charge the customers for it, and they borrow from the bank. So they make a year 1, and they year 2, year 3, year 4, then year 5. They capitalize that. So the sum in today's dollars of all those 5 years is $1 billion. Then they use a very simple equation. It's called the level annualized cost factor. And that produces a level stream which includes payment for interest and payment on principal. And I think the equation is very simple. I times 1 plus I raised to the t, that's the term, the period, 30 years, whatever, divided by 1 plus I raised to the t minus 1. And that produces the level annualized cost factor, which you simply multiply the total debt by when you want to put a level annualized stream into the rate structure. Anyway, I'm going to let you go now because that's enough for one day. And I'll put this up on YouTube. God bless. I hope this helps. But we can get this done, and we can actually help the city. And I think the city should be more interested in having people like us do it than people that probably don't really understand economics and computing and engineering all as an eclectic and necessary combination of this.